Hey guys, it's Chris from Deus Machina, and in this series of videos, I'm talking about the artwork that inspired me. It's the reason why I became a writer. It's the reason why I became a science fiction fan, more so than I'd say even Star Trek or Star Wars. The artwork that would captivate me, I would be fascinated. Even when they were frightening, I was incredibly moved by these images, and I wanted to tell stories about them. And this artist is one of the top three. I think, oh yeah, top three. I would say this would be number two, not number one. I should probably go in order, but whatever. This is probably the second. And there's a whole list of people I wouldn't categorize from 4 to 10. And I mentioned in the previous video: Angus McKee, Colin Hay, Bob Lazell, and one of my all-time favorites, Tony Roberts. If you look at Tony Roberts, he's got a lot of stuff in the spacecraft book, and if you see his portfolio, you can see why he's such an amazing artist. However, one of the artists that I also fell in love with at that time, which you don't see a lot presented in the TTA books, is a guy named Jim Burns. Jim Burns is a fantastic artist, did a lot of novelization, but he's also responsible for doing a lot of the sci-fi role-playing games from the 80s and 90s. And I absolutely love his designs. And this is interesting that when you get this book, this portfolio, it is bound so poorly by Paper Tiger that all the pages simply just fall out. And I think it's probably intentional that they ship it in a book, but they are expecting you to take the prints out and frame them or what have you. And if I had a house and a room, I would probably frame a bunch of these. But these are really good condition because I don't open this thing that much. So as a result, I found a portfolio that fit these, and so forth. And so you can see, tells you where the cover of the book was from, and so forth. Some amazing stuff. That's really cool. Some of these are, I wouldn't say iconic, but some of them are. Like this is very cool. Like that's very neat. Look at that. And that is from Battle Cars, and I think that's probably a game. Right. This is another one from Freeway Fighter, so it's a different one. 84. He has his figures are pretty good. I think they're really good. The Lovers, 1981. This is a great one. I love his cityscapes. Are very fanciful, very futuristic. There's a good one here as well. I don't think he was inspirational. He probably not as much. Like he was inspirational on his own, but not as much as the gestalt of the entire TTA books. Very bizarre illustration. This is a good one. I think I've played with this in some of my stories. Very cool. This is from Tower of Glass. In fact, I do believe there's a Tower of Glass in Amethyst, which is named after that illustration. Very interesting. You know, it makes you wonder what the story is about. Like that one. Very cool. Love the spaceport sequences he draws. This is neat. There's one that's going to show up here in a little bit that's going to be very recognizable. Right, fantasy or more historical. Jim Burns, 84. Here it is. And some of you should immediately recognize this. But this is a fantastic illustration. One of the most iconic illustrations from this game. 1984. As you guys know, it is Star Frontiers. So this is a fantastic illustration that shows you 4 of the races within that story. That's probably the one that's most recognizable. That one's cool. I love this one. This is such a fantastic illustration. Very classic bio of a space tyrant. But the spaceship designs, I love that bulbous, organic look. This is another fantastic one. I love this one. This is the long run. I don't even have to look at it. I know what it is because it's a very, very iconic image for me in my youth. This I also know. This is from an Arthur C. Clarke. This is the cover of an Arthur C. Clarke novel. It's actually not an Arthur C. Clarke novel. He conceived it, he wrote the original short story, and then somebody else expanded it to a novel length. That's Venus Prime. There's like 4 books in the series. That's the cover of one of them. That one's interesting. Some of these were definitely fascinating and somewhat creepy and frightening in their own right. Very cool. Very evocative. But that blends us into this one, which is Lightship, which is his definitive art book. Also Paper Tiger. Paper Tiger, I think, does all of them. And this one is 85. It's pretty old. And there it is, right from the front. And this one shows a lot more illustrations. Some of them we've seen before, but a lot of that stuff. Some really interesting imagery. And there we're seeing a lot of images we've seen before. And this one kind of talks about the history of the franchise and, of the history of his artwork. And this, once again, if we look familiar, this is familiar right here. This is an illustration from the TTA book. This is the kind of, I can't remember if it's called the Hobgoblin or the Goblin or whatever. Oh, the Fat Boy. That's the Fat Boy. That's the name of that ship. It's the A113 Fat Boy. But of course, originally was the cover for The Long Way Home. But that's the reason why Jim Burns was very inspirational, because he created some of these illustrations. That one's cool. I like that one, City in the Stars. And like, look at that. That is so cool. And you can't help but, get inspired to employ some of these in your writing when you do games or when you're doing novels. And sometimes you just take the inspiration, you look at this and go, hey, this is a neat idea, and then finding a way of telling that in your story in a way that's original. Because ideas are not always owned by any one person, unless it's a very specific idea, in which case it can be, in my opinion. Right? So there you go. So that's my retrospective on the great Jim Burns. Jim Burns is still with us. He's in his 70s. I don't know if he's still doing artwork, but I have to assume that he's still. But I absolutely adore what he does. There's so much detail. I love the rounded, organic nature to his technology. Very different, by the way, to the other two artists I'll talk about in my Pacific retrospectives in this series. The fact that when you look at his artwork, there aren't a lot of straight lines. And we can see that, we can see that in a lot of designs. Even here, everything is curved. It's almost like he never uses a ruler. And I think that's very cool. It's very evocative. It's very unique to his style. I have a drinking game every time I say the word evocative. But his people are very surreal, very kind of photorealistic. I mean, even these, which look interesting. This is really cool. This is Blade Runner. Now, obviously, we know who designed most of the visuals for Blade Runner, so it's fascinating seeing these, because obviously we know that spinners don't look like this. And we know who did that, because we'll be talking about him in the next video. But even this vehicle, rounded, very few straight lines. Even these, like, obviously he's very inspired by the 50s, 60s cars, because once again, there's very few straight lines. Even the spaceship here, very Star Trek-y. There's an interesting look from '82. But I think, but once again, he's still carrying over the idea of ships that are not just black or gray, that they actually have some measure of color. He likes gold. And, but I love his vehicle designs. The rounded, organic little look to him is very cool. But this is, so this is Jim Burns. A very wide palette of different styles, different art. And even he's touched on the idea of kind of playing off the Boris Vallejo style. And some of them are surreal, more something that you would hang in a museum. But I definitely enjoy when he goes full sci-fi. That's my love of Jim Burns. Anyway, guys, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next series where I talk about another artist.